Okay, so we are now live. I will just check my Facebook if it's working. And it is.
Awesome.
So, hi everyone. I am here going live having a conversation with Claire Molinard about the Outrageous Love Festival and most of all about the topic of pleasure, because that is the theme of the festival of this year. Welcome, Claire, and thank you for having this conversation with me.
Thank you, Kriska. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. This topic of pleasure is very exciting. I've seen a few videos and texts about reclaiming pleasure in times of uncertainty. So could you start by beginning to share a little bit about the Dharma of pleasure? What is this all about?
Yeah, so I'll share about the Dharma and then the topic, right? You mentioned the topic reclaiming pleasure in times of uncertainty. So the Dharma of pleasure is a Dharma, a teaching that Dr. Mark Gaffney has been developing for the last 10 years in different ways. And it's a very fundamental teaching in his body of work. And so this version, this edition of that Dharma takes its whole a whole new dimension in the times that we're in today. So we actually couldn't think of a better topic to address than this topic right now. And it was a topic that we chose before. And right now, in these times of great uncertainty and crisis of intimacy in all ways, this Dharma is most important than ever. So we're very excited to have Mark come and teach about pleasure in these times.
And so what is the, first of all, what is a Dharma? Maybe people don't even know what Dharma is. And Mark, I know he also calls it first principles. Could you explain what that is?
Mm-hmm. So Dharma means teaching. Dharma means life. Dharma means a way of life, right? And first principles. Mark is starting to make that distinction into the first principles are the Dharma. They are basic principles that are true to everyone. They are basic principles that rule reality, and we're diving into these principles, finding them into our deepest hearts, and bringing all the wisdom that has unfolded through pre-modernity, modernity, post-modernity, and articulating these principles to speak to reality in the best way possible today. And that is, of course, always evolving. So the Dharma, the first principles of pleasure, are deserve to be articulated, and they deserve to be taught and found within ourselves, because their pleasure is part of our essential beingness. That's one of the first principles of that Dharma.
Right. Yeah, that's a big statement. Pleasure is part of our essential beingness or part of our essence. I think many people, they kind of put pleasure aside as something, maybe if I get to it, or if I deserve it, or if I work hard enough, then maybe I can get to pleasure. But what you're saying is that it's part of our essence and that it actually all starts there. Is that right?
Exactly, Krista. And actually what you're articulating in those little, voices that you just spoke, maybe I'll get to it if I deserve it, maybe if I work hard enough. These are voices that exist in all of us. I don't know, I'm sure that some of the people that are hearing us now could relate to those voices. I certainly can.
I know I can, yeah.
And these are voices that speak to us, that are like thresholds. There are like, how can I say that? They're like ceilings inside of us. They stop us from experiencing pleasure. So this is a an aspect of the teachings that we'll be exploring. And basically, that's kind of the beginning of the teaching, because it helps us clarify two things: what pleasure, what is our threshold, how much pleasure do we allow ourselves to experience, and how much pleasure can we actually receive and feel. And one thing that we realize when we go through that is that actually pleasure is part of our life force. And when we stop, when all these voices that stop us from experiencing pleasure, they control us they keep us at a certain level of aliveness. So that's one aspect. It's only one aspect, but it's a very important one, because without exploring that and making that, identifying how that works within ourselves, we can't really experience. We can't even go to the pleasure that we're talking about, the pleasure as an essential part of our beingness.
Yeah. And so what is pleasure in that sense? I know many people, and including myself, the first time when you hear about pleasure, you think about pleasure in your body. And I know that's also something that you will be talking about, but it's so much more than that, right? So how do you define this pleasure with a capital, or this bigger pleasure? What is this all about?
Yeah, and that's why we're going to spend 5 days in those teachings, because it's actually, as you were starting to say, it's actually a vast teaching. Pleasure. So one of the first principle that we teach is that pleasure is a skill. Pleasure is actually an art form. And the deeper the pleasure, the deeper skill we need to cultivate. So pleasure is not just one thing, I get it, I don't get it. It's actually a skill to be able to experience pleasure. So that's one principle. We'll go into 22 of them to actually 22 principles to define what pleasure is versus quantified pleasure, pseudo pleasure, how do we distinguish between the two. And I won't go into the whole thing, but one way to know if it's a genuine pleasure or a pseudo pleasure is the aftertaste that you have. Right. That's one of the ways that if it has a lasting good aftertaste, it's probably good pleasure. It's just a parenthesis. But so we'll go into 22 principles of pleasure. And these are not just mental things that you jot down. Okay, this is the first principle. No, these are actually things that we explore them in our body. They're only principles if they are verifiable in our experience. And we touch that. The way we study at the festival is an embodied way. It's always it always brings in not just the mind or the heart or the body, but all three of them. So when I say we'll go into the voices and distinguish the voices that stop us from pleasure, and when I say we'll explore the 22 principles, it's not that we'll be taking notes and learning, boom, boom, boom. We'll actually be playing with these things and experiencing them. So that's one thing. This is like the things we need to be able to distinguish in order to start accessing the levels of pleasure in our body, recognizing how we get pleasure from relationship. That's another level. The pleasure of serving a cause, the pleasure of serving a cause that's bigger than me. It's another kind of pleasure. The pleasure of feeling and realizing that I'm part of something much bigger, that I'm interconnected to all beings. That's another pleasure. And then there's a pleasure of living my unique self, or of giving my unique gifts. And then the pleasure of participating in evolving the world towards more love, more connection, more creativity. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, all the facets of what we'll be exploring during the festival.
Wow, that's
As
huge.
you can tell, I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, just listening to you speaking about pleasure just gives me pleasure, and I feel the energy of it and the excitement of it and the up-leveling of who we are as human beings. That's really amazing. Yeah, I just lost my thread. I'm so like, yeah.
Well, maybe it's a good segue into why is it
Right.
why reclaiming our pleasure is so important in times of crisis. Right?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
because I wanted to give people a big picture of everything that we'll be touching, and obviously now I've received a lot of messages and feedback about, are you really going to offer pleasure as a topic? Right. In these times, are you guys nuts, or what do you mean? Is this some kind of hedonistic trip that that's so? All of this is not what we're doing. The reason why I'm so passionate about reclaiming, about the necessity of reclaiming pleasure, about offering this topic at the festival this year, is that we need more people giving their unique gifts. We need more people tapping into their life force, into their heart's desire, and living their life from that place. And that's the pleasure we're talking about. The distinctions that we are learning, that we're teaching, the clarification of what stops us from accessing that deep inner pleasure through exploring all the voices. All that is needed in order to clarify our heart's desire. And the deepest pleasure is to be able to live from our heart, our clarified heart desire to give our gifts.
Yeah.
So reclaiming pleasure in times of crisis means that when we have more people doing that, we have more people living in service of life, living in service of a more intimate world, living in service of doing goodness, of beauty, of truth in the world. And that's what we need today, more than ever.
Yeah, that just brings tears to my eyes when you started with, we need more people. And that it's, what I love about the festival is that it's not just for my own pleasure or my own transformation, but that it's actually also stepping into our leadership to create a better world. And as Mark Goffney says it, to participate in the evolution of love. And as you're just speaking about that, like, we need more people to be in their pleasure to actually make this transition in the world. And you mentioned before, you called it, and Mark also calls it, global crisis of intimacy. Can you speak into that a little bit? How this pandemic is a crisis of intimacy?
So the way Mark puts it, Mark Gaffney, of course, being, for those that hear us and might not know who he is, he's the lead teacher of these teachings and the philosopher behind this ideas of unique self and global crisis of intimacy. So basically, right now, we live in a world that is created by a world of separation, that's created by the separate self. And the separate self is a consciousness that we all know, which is the consciousness that I am Claire and you're Krista and you're in your little place in Holland and I'm here in Corsica and you and I are separate. And that's basically, to make it very simple, it's a very narrow view of identity. And nevertheless, it is the view that most of the world has, that individuals have. They have this sensation of being disconnected from the bigger whole, from nature. We've disconnected ourselves from nature. Technology has increased exponentially, but we haven't increased our capacity to access our interior. We haven't evolved enough to realize as a global collective. Of course, many people in the world have always been able to realize that they are not that small self, that I am part of something much bigger. So here and there, we've had people awaken to that truth, always. However, we haven't done so through as a collective, as humanity. And today, humanity is identified mostly to this world of to the separate self, which created the world of disconnection and destruction that we're in. Right now, what's most important is that not only do we realize that we are one, that we're one heart, one mind, one nature, that we're a part of she, that she moves through us. That's a realization that we need to have as a global collective. But from that, we need you, me, and more people acting from that whole that ground and giving their gifts. That's the crisis, the response of a crisis of intimacy from a place of from a unique self perspective. If I was very clear on that last part, but if I wasn't, please ask me to clarify.
Yeah, for me it is clear. And then coming back to pleasure, because before you explained that pleasure is about being in your unique self. So then combining that with a world where everybody is in their separate self, and it's actually about realizing who we are, that we are all connected, and that our unique gifts are needed in the world. And that is the pleasure that you are talking about, and we are going to study at the festival.
Exactly. So I just want to give a picture, because that it's a picture that spoke to me when I heard it for the first time from Mark. Yeah. When you're in your unique self, when you're giving your unique gifts, when this is happening, when you're connected to source through your unique self, it's like having your plugged into your unique connection to source. So source is moving through you uniquely, and that's a great pleasure. It's alive, it's full of joy, and that's a sign that you're giving your gifts. Doesn't mean, and that's a principle of pleasure, doesn't mean that it's easy. And actually, one of the principles that I love in this teachings. Oh, sorry, I lost your back. My screen popped out. Yeah, I lost my train of thought. One of the principles that I love is that the opposite of pain is not pleasure, right? We often think that, okay, there's pain and there's pleasure, and if I have a lot of pleasure, I won't have any pain. That's not how it works. Actually, the opposite of pain is comfort. The opposite of pain is living a life of being comfortably numb in what you already know, the pleasure is actually sometimes painful. It's not easy to give. Right. It's not easy to live at that level of aliveness, of desire to really give your best, from a unique self perspective, not from an ego perspective. So that's also a distinction. So I don't want to go too far into.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
As I hear you speak, there's a lot more questions coming up, like how does that work? How does that work? But that's too much for now. But it's a very, very clear vision on what it means to be in your pleasure, and that it's actually not about the superficial kind of pleasure where it's easy and flowing. And that's actually what I'm seeing also a lot in my network, in my community, in the spiritual world, where everything is always supposed to be easy. And that's what I really love about what you're saying, is that it's actually, it can be really hard at times to step into the world, to share your gifts and to follow your own unique path. And that there's actually a deepening of pleasure. As you're speaking about it, I can feel it. It's actually a deeper pleasure than a superficial pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you're making these first distinctions, yeah, it's I can feel that deepening happening already. And as we shared in the beginning, this is for who's just tuning in, this is going to be the topic, the theme of the Outrageous Love Festival. So this is just a first touch on these principles of pleasure, and Dr. Mark Gaffney is going to teach there, and that's why I'm having this conversation with you, Claire. So maybe we can make that shift to talk a little bit about this festival, because this is the 8th time that you are organizing it together with Shahad Korten in Holland. And this year it's online, of course. So maybe you can share a little bit about the background of the festival, and especially, of course, this year.
Thank you, Krista. Yes. So as you said, it's the 8th edition of the festival, and obviously it's online this year. So that's a big shift for us. And our greatest invitation, Shahad and I are taking that as an invitation, is to create, to create, obviously it's going to be a new space because it's an online space, and it's going to be different from the in-person, beautiful, intimate weeks that we've had 7 times on a row, in which the festival has always been a place of where the Dharma and life meet. And we've created this community year after year to the spaces for people to be able to really embody in togetherness the teachings, in practice, in play, in study. So it's been a beautiful incubator for the Dharma. I also like to call it a Dharma lab, a place where teachings become refined, they become more articulate. So it has that dimension. And this year, our challenge and our invitation is to create to not make something less, but make something different, and hopefully even more of that. So our commitment and wish with Shahad is to create a very rich space, which of course is going to be online, but there will be ways to connect that bring the best of technology and heart space. That's really at least my deepest intention, is to bring this to and to explore with everyone how that can coexist and be used for the best. So that's just one aspect. The way we're going to do that is we're going to have 2 hours of teachings, Dharma sessions with Dr. Mark Gaffney every day. So that's deep study where the first principles of pleasure and all the things that I mentioned, the voices, the principles, the levels will be explored. And then we'll have spaces where we can explore that in smaller groups, and we'll create that dimension. These groups may actually be in person for some of you, and you'll be one of them, to have an in-person group. So we're offering the possibility for those for whom it's possible to have this in-person groups, if not online small groups. So that would be another dimension. Then there will be workshops where we will do embodiment work, even though it's online, and we've done this before, so that's not a problem for us. We have experienced teachers and workshop facilitators that can do that. And we'll have you, Krista, and other wonderful musicians that are going to play for us. And we'll have our art and yoga and meditation. So there'll be all kinds of dimensions. But the idea is that we're not going to create something where people can pick from this, from that, but actually less offering, all centered around the teachings, and a way to weave these things together, that at the end of the festival you have a coherent experience of community, of heart expansion, of mind-blowing, heart-blowing transmission of the teachings.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yes, I love what you're saying, that it's one coherent journey. And festivals, sometimes it sounds like it's just, yeah, different kinds of workshops and just do whatever you want, but this is really a deep dive, as Mark said it, a Dharma intensive. So really deep studying, deep practicing, and really going through a deep transformation personally, but also evolutionary as a whole collective. And from my own experience, every year, this is my 5th year, I think, every year is just, there's so much to learn and to study and to experience, but there's also this deeper journey that is happening where my unique self just emerges, for instance, with the music, or in every little connection, with every little conversation, magic is happening. So for me, it's also this field of outrageous love that is just alive there, and being online, it's already happening. Of course, it's different than being together, but I can feel this energy already rising, and that's just, yeah, for me, the beautiful gift. And you already mentioned that it's not just a teaching, but also a transmission. Maybe you can share a little bit what that word means for you, or what your experience is with transmission.
Yeah, I'm going to take that. But before that, I just want to speak to something that came up for me when you were talking, because that's also a dimension of the festival that's beautiful and that deserves to be said. We witness each other. I've known you for many years, and I've witnessed your emergence as a unique self. As you've probably, you could say the same for me. And we can say that about many people that have been through a few festivals, and we've witnessed their emergence year after year. And that, you know, it touches me a lot, that this is what this festival is about.
Yes. Totally, yes. Beautiful.
I wanted to say that. And so transmission. Yeah. As I said earlier, these teachings are not just, you know, mental things that we're going to learn about principles and levels. And these are, I'm not saying this is not good, because cognitive understanding is very important, and it is part of these teachings. There is something much deeper in the way Dr. Mark Gaffney teaches. And that's one thing that I've witnessed year after year, is that he has the rare capacity to transmit knowledge and wisdom through his words and through his heart in a way that's very direct and unique, of course. So the transmission comes through him. He doesn't, of course, it comes through his unique instrument, but there is a deep wisdom and a deep essential knowledge that is transmitted through Mark and through his distinctions, his capacity to see very clearly and to describe reality very, very clearly. That's only that I haven't experienced in anyone. So, but to go back to the word transmission, it's a direct it's a direct embodied knowledge that you receive, that might be understood by the mind or not, that will be felt through the heart and the body to some extent, sometimes a lot, sometimes. So people receive what they're ready to receive in this transmission, but it is part of the offering. There is transmission.
Yes, beautiful, yes. And as you're speaking those words, I don't know if it's right, but for me, the word initiation also feels right. Like it's this energetic imprint. And as you say, sometimes I don't even understand all the words, because it's also intellectual, it's also scientific. And it's on all levels. So when I don't understand it, I can just open my heart and I can still feel the energy of it imprinting on my body and my whole DNA. So I can totally relate to what you're saying.
Yeah. And to the extent that you're able to let go and to surrender,
yeah,
the transmission is happens.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So to start coming to a closure, who do you think this festival is totally perfect for? Who should definitely come here?
If you're longing to feel more alive, to if you're longing to, if you have a sense that your life has more meaning and that you're willing to contribute to the world, but you're feeling helpless or overwhelmed by, you know, what is there to do and how, what's mine to do, what's my purpose, there will be some answers for you in that dimension. So that would be a reason to come to the festival, to find the purpose that is yours, to not, and if you're done, we're looking for easy formulas to that, right? For answers outside of yourself, because you'll find your inner fire that will, you know, your desire to be your unique self will guide you to your purpose. So that would be one way that you could enter this field. If you're longing, if you're feeling not alive, if you're feeling like you really would love to experience more pleasure, but you feel like you can't access it. It doesn't, you don't even know where to find it in your, when you find it, it's through addictions. And so if you want to clarify what pleasure, real pleasure, aliveness is for you, that's a reason to come to the festival. If you're longing to create connections and to find soul friends, you know, meaningful conversations and people that show up in their genuine self, and that, and to create friendship that lasts for years and years. That's also a reason to come to the festival. Yeah. So that's already 3 good reasons to come to the festival that come to my mind.
Yes, great. I totally agree with that. So if people are excited about this topic, and I'm sure that they are, where can they find more information?
I should say one more reason to come is really if you're in pain, if you're in pain with the state of the world, if you wonder what this is all about, and if you don't want to settle for a dystopian world that, you know, we're seeing looming at the horizon, if you don't want that, if you feel that there is something else that is possible, you should come to the festival.
Wow. Yes. And if I can add to that, what I always love, what Mark Govney says about this, that it's actually, I don't even know how he says it, but coming to this table of changing the world and being evolutionary mystics and being pioneering souls together to change the world together. So it doesn't even have to be that you are in your own personal pain, but you actually just want to join hands all around the world and joining what Mark calls this unique self symphony, where we are all contributing our unique gifts and changing the world together. And I love Mark's vision every time that I do feel overwhelmed by this global crisis. When I listen to him, all of the pain can be there, but there's also so much hope, and that actually this whole crisis is an invitation to create a new world. So I think many people can also, relate to your last invitation of this pain in the world, and actually,
and the most meaningful one. And thank you for articulating so beautifully. That's exactly what you said, you know, being part of a bigger game. And Mark always says, are you ready to play a larger game? That's the game we're talking about.
Yes.
So now I forgot your question, so you'll have to ask it again. You were
Sorry, what? My last question.
I missed your question. I
Well,
think
the last question was where people can find more information.
Yeah, so on our website, www.outrageouslovefestival.org,
Check, yeah.
you'll be able to read basic information. You can find me or Shahat on Facebook, Claire Molinard or Shahat Corton. You can write to us, info@outrageouslovefestival.org. And
we'll post it all below this video as well. Yeah, great. This has been a really inspiring conversation. Thank you so much for joining me here and sharing all of your knowledge with us. Is there anything you want to share before we end?
Come to the festival, become part of this evolutionary, unique self-symphony. And let's do this. Thank you so much, Krista, for having me. It was a great joy to be here.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Claire. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.